All right. All right, perfect. Well, let's go ahead and get started, and others will join us as they come in. So, greetings, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to our Earth Biogenome Project Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee session. In the abstract, it's called a Fireside Chat Exploring Social Justice in Biodiversity Genomics. But we're going to be sharing just a little bit more about the story behind this and what it's transitioning to. But to start, I want to introduce myself. My name is Sadye Páez, and I am one of your hosts for today's session. And I'm joined by my co-host, Nate.
Hey, Sadie, how's it going?
It's good. How are you, Nate?
Good. Happy Halloween.
That's for some of us, yes, right? We celebrate that.
How you feeling right now?
Um, so honestly, I've been thinking about this all morning. I'm both happy, excited, and a little bit nervous because this is something, right, that our committee has been talking about for a while. Our committee got started about 3 years ago, and we've had this idea of sharing stories with each other for a while. And it's here, like this day is here. How are you feeling?
I'm excited. I'm a little nervous and fully caffeinated, so I think I'm ready to go.
Excellent. Well, for those of us joining today, feel free to grab your own caffeinated beverage of choice. We want to share with you a little bit about what we're doing today before we fully get into the session. Let me see if I can share my slides. View slideshow. Here we go. So in the abstract, you'll see that it says a fireside chat, but we are taking this opportunity to launch this new initiative here at the Biodiversity Genomics 2024 meeting because it's where we got started as a committee. And we are naming this initiative Emerge, Evolve, Embolden, Storytelling in, for, and as Science. And our vision is that by gathering to share and listen to each other's stories, new perspectives will emerge to evolve our thinking and ways of being, and the way we make sense in the world, and embolden us to new courageous ways of being as people in science. And we've chosen storytelling because storytelling is this practice of sharing stories to communicate our ideas, our beliefs, and our experiences. And it really engages us in our collective humanity because every society, every organization, every group has a story to describe their origins and how they interact and, sort of how they make sense of the world.
Yeah, and each of us as human beings in science have experiences that shape who we become, how we understand the world around us, and how we navigate our roles and responsibilities in the sciences that each of us participate in. Uh, these lived experiences, our stories, matter precisely because they shape the decisions we make and why we make them.
Yeah, so we're excited about what's happening today because we have two really incredible guests that have agreed to pioneer and launch this initiative with us. And we're hopeful that today is just the start and that moving forward, we'll be able to share many more stories with you, our community. And so what I want to do for just a couple moments is to help you understand how you're going to participate as an audience member. So in a couple of moments, Nate is going to introduce our speakers very briefly to you. And then we're going to get into a conversation. And this conversation is happening in real time. This is not rehearsed. This is not a panel conversation. It's not a lecture. The four of us have prepared and have thought about some things, but the conversation that is happening between myself, Nate, and our two speakers is literally unfolding in real time. So we may be surprised. We may not know what to say in a moment. We're going to experience this right alongside with you. And so if you have any questions while this is happening, we want you to go ahead and put those questions in the chat box. And we have two team members who are part of our production team, Nicolette Caparello and Mark Palmeda Flores, who are monitoring the chat, and they're going to create a poll of your top 3 questions or themes. And then later towards the end of our conversation, we're going to poll you, the audience, on those top 3 questions for the one question that you really want answered by our guest speakers. And then they're going to answer that for you. And the voting on this poll is going to be anonymous. So you can either use this QR code with your mobile device to sort of go ahead and register, or there's going to be instructions in the chat to also let you know how you can sign up to participate in this anonymous polling. You're going to have a part at registration. You're going to select skip for now, and then it's going to bring you to a landing page of waiting for the presentation to begin. And then you just hang out until we let you know that you can vote. The last thing I want to ask of you as our audience to participate today is to please be curious, to be open, and to be really, really kind to our speakers and to yourselves. We're all learning, and part of why we're excited about this is because we have an opportunity to be vulnerable with one another and to share our personal narratives and how that intersects with our science and our decision making. But we don't have the answers per se. And so we believe that all of us can learn from each other, and that's really why we're here today. So please be kind to one another, and especially to our speakers.
So today our guests and our very first speakers for Emerge, Evolve, and Embolden are Crystal Sosi and Mark Blackster. And they're both distinguished leaders in the field of biodiversity genomics, and we are so happy that they've agreed to pioneer this effort with us, this Emerge, Evolve, Embolden process experience. And candidly share some of their narratives with all of you. And so I just wanted to just a quick way of introducing him to you. So today Crystal Sosi is going to be joining us. She is an assistant professor in the School of Life Sciences and also the associate director of the Biodiversity Knowledge Integration Center at Arizona State University, and co-founder of the Native Biodata Consortium. And among all these other things, I think I can relate to Crystal in the fact that I am also a chronic procrastinator. So shout out to all the chronic procrastinators out there. But Crystal's a wonderful advocate for data and genomics and also justice issues in the sciences, and we're super excited to have her here. In addition to Crystal, we also have Mark Blackster joining us. Mark is one of the lead scientists for the Sanger Institute's Tree of Life program, Darwin Tree of Life, an expert in aquatic symbiotic genomics, and a huge contributor to the Earth Biogenome Project. He's a professor of evolutionary genomics at the University of Edinburgh and a fellow with the Royal Society of Edinburgh. Mark, we're just so happy to have you here and joining us here. And interesting to know that even with all these accomplishments, you're still suffering from imposter syndrome. But we all really appreciate all the work that you do in the field in general. So we're super glad to have you here to talk with us. And let's just get into it. So Sadie, do you want to start off?
I do. I loved Crystal, your love naps. Mark, I also, when you said imposter syndrome, when you said that to me, I felt a sense of relief and also, wow, if Mark still feels this, okay, I breathed a huge sigh of relief. And so I want to get started with, we mentioned today that we're gathering around storytelling because our experiences shape who we are and our identities and kind of how they intersect with each other. And many of us know both of you as guiding voices in this space of biodiversity genomics, but we may not know a lot about your backgrounds. And so I want to give you both an opportunity to kind of tell us, who are you? Who is Crystal? Who is Mark? And how have your life experiences led you to where you are today?
Crystal, you go first.
No, I bend to you. I'd love to hear your story first. I'm sure it's far more interesting than mine. Thank you.
It's actually, just to say, it's really good to meet you. I know we're not in the same physical space, but I've read so much of your work and really honored to share a platform with you. Thank you. Other things. I mean, I put father down on the list I gave to Sadie and Nate. I'm parent of 3 wonderful children, 2 of whom are no longer children, 2 of whom are perfectly grown up. And none of them are scientists. None of them are biological scientists. And it's really important to me that I spend time I can with them, but also recognizing they are my heroes in many ways because they do amazing things, more amazing things than I do, if you can believe that. One of my sons is an intensive care nurse, and it really does save people's lives every day. So, I'm humbled by him. When I was growing up as a scientist, I mean, I'll leave all the science bits out. I was also an activist. So I was working in anti-nuclear weapons campaigns in the UK, getting arrested by the police for being in front of cruise missile transporters and on military bases. I participated in anti-racist demonstrations in the UK. We had the far right demonstrating in local communities in London, where I also lived, and we protested against that. And I would also, I was a pro-feminist activist. So we ran an organization called Creches Against Sexism, which provided childcare for women's groups, free childcare for women's groups who wanted to meet and wanted to bring their children as well. And so we provided the childcare. And that bit of activism is still there in me. It's still how I progress a lot of my work, is by thinking of this as motivating an activist community to feel its own power and do direct actions that change the world. But underneath all that, I had a very privileged upbringing. So I'm white, I'm male, that always helps. My parents were upper middle class. My parents were academics. So it was never a strange thing for me to be obsessed with science or with learning. So I recognize that privilege now that I have, that it was never a surprise to my parents that I wanted to be a scientist. So that's if you like my story.
Hey, Mark,
three bits I'm very proud of. Yeah.
Could I ask you real quick? You know, you mentioned all this this great work in activism. Was there a person or an experience in your life that kind of pushed you in that direction, or is it just something that like you just tried it and it kept growing and growing and growing? Or
I don't know. I mean, I guess my parents were part of the campaign for nuclear disarmament, the CND and the Committee of 100 in the 1960s in the UK. It was something they never told us about. It's something I discovered later. So obviously there was something there. My father dallied with the Communist Party, which is obviously not something one would do today in the same way, but in the 1950s, it was a true alternative. So I guess there was a bit there. But otherwise, I mean, there were lots of people who inspired me. I lived in a commune with a guy called Paul Baker, who now lives in Nicaragua. And he is a committed activist to the point that he has put himself at the front line of dealing with neocolonialism and the effects of capitalism on first world, you know, on the communities that he was so engaged with. So these people have inspired me, and their inspiration is kind of you do by acting, not by talking.
thanks for that.
So great, Mark. Thank you so much for sharing. Oh gosh, I have to say that it's such an honor to be in front of somebody that has actually walked the walk and has actually been on the kind of front lines, at least one point in their life, really advocating for rights. Now, I thought I had an FBI profile on me, but I was still granted entry into the White House. So that was a little bit of an ego balloon pop, because I was kind of expecting there to be a little bit more on that file, but I guess not. Anyway, thank you all for the kind invitation. It's always such a great honor to speak freely in a setting like this in front of colleagues and members of our scientific communities, and just like really talk one-on-one. I don't think we get that many chances. So yeah, everyone, that's good morning. I love saying that. I think the first time that's my introduction in the Navajo language, the Nekpazad. It's a traditional Diné introduction where we introduce ourselves first by our 4 clans, introducing our ancestors, but then also, if you're doing it correctly, I feel like you introduce your ancestors first and then you introduce your name. And the first time I did that in a scientific conference, introduce myself, it felt amazing. It felt liberating. It was actually hard getting the words out of my mouth to start with, but it's been a lot more freeing ever since. The first time I was able to do the introduction with the Dr. Crystal Sosi, it was like an announcement to the world, to my alma mater, you know, basically, screw you, you tried to keep me down, and I still made it through it on the other side. Truly piled higher and deeper. So my background, I think to really do justice, I have to start with that of my family. I'm first generation. Each of my parents have been impacted by the boarding school era in the US in some capacity. Incredibly intelligent individuals and human beings, and they read so much. I think their master bedroom in their house is just being inundated, whether the walls are coming in with all the books that are on the shelves. And and I you know, it's really my dad that brought us off of the Navajo reservation, meaning myself and my two older full biological siblings. I actually have three half siblings too. Big family. Ours is one of the smallest among my cousins. But I know that was a decision to move us off res that wasn't an easy one, because, you know, this is like a new, after being a part of the boarding school era and having this almost forced severance of community and identity themselves, to then make a decision onto your children and your grandchildren to remove themselves, like, by choice, it is also, I think, one that had some profound inner turmoil. But he actually worked for he was in a medical center, not as a medical provider, but as a power plant operator, often the midnight shift. And he was worked there for 42 years before he retired, semi recently. And such, I got a lot of urges from my family and my grandmothers, like, go to college. They didn't know what it meant. They did not know what college was. But they knew it was important to get educated, to give that back to our communities. But, you know, when you are from a family where no one has really attended college, and your assessment of what is of benefit to your family and community is usually those careers along the lines of becoming a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer, or an instructor. And so I was never ever told in my entire life to become a scientist. And I feel like that was part of my journey, sort of starting working at the pathology clinic as an intern, and then at the NIH, just handling blood and urine samples, thinking that I wanted to become a medical provider. But really, the reality is such that I was pushed to become an MD, a PhD. Part of it is just research in the types of questions in the biomedical space. Oh, surprise everyone, I'm actually a human genomicist, or human genetic epidemiologist, who just dovetails in biodiversity genomics. But anyway, so going back, it was really because I would have to take time off of working two part-time jobs. There was no way I could afford time off of work to study for the MCAT, or intern in a doctor's office that wasn't, you know, like a family member's, or pay for the medical school application. So the reality is such that some of those choices, MD versus PhD, were made for me. But I don't regret it. I actually really love the fact that being an Indigenous person and thinking about genetic data, not only from ourselves and our bodies and the bodies of our ancestors, but also from our related kin species, and also or from the environment around us. This notion of stewardship and care is so important, and relationality. And these are concepts that I think translate very well into the space of biodiversity and genomics. So I'm very fortunate that I get to play in which discipline at home that I want to work in, dovetailing between health disparities work, also biodiversity genomics work, and where needed in the space of biological anthropology in terms of paleogenomics. But that was not a direct route by any means. I have, in addition to my PhD, two masters in completely different fields. One being in bioethics, and another one being a master's in public health. And yet, all three of these domains have been so important for doing the type of interdisciplinary work that I do. And I think it's all useful. I draw on all those experiences and types of expertise, in addition to the expertise of my community members. And as such, I've been a graduate student for a really long time. And now I'm finally on the other side of it, year 2 of my faculty appointment at Arizona State University. And it feels like home, being back close to my traditional homelands and hopefully making an impact on the indigenous countries coming after me. Thank you.
I know, Nate, you have the next question, but I do want to thank both Crystal and Mark for bringing up this idea of sort of our role as scientists and caring, for the species, the work that we're doing, and sort of for each other and the different paths that have brought you here. And so I want to ask our community members too that are joining us in the audience, if something resonates with you that one of our speakers is saying, feel free to drop one of a thumbs up, a heart, let us know either through that or through the chat as well if you want to join kind of in that way. But Nate, I'll let you go ahead, and I know you have something you want to ask.
Yeah, no, definitely. And thanks so much for both of you for letting us get to know you. We really appreciate it. So, the more conversations that we have with others, the more we understand what each of us faces in terms of hardships on our journeys. And, you have both shared some of the experiences that helped shape your worldviews. And now just turning to that, a little bit more towards your role as a person in science. We'd love to learn a little bit more about your story as a leader. And so one of the things we're curious about, we talked a little bit about this, but in your current role and spaces that you occupy as a person in science, what do you get asked about the most? And what do you wish others would ask you about?
I kind of want to punt to Mark because he's had more opportunities to field more questions than me.
Just because being around for longer doesn't mean I've got any better answers, though. That's the funny bit. So one thing people ask me a lot is, how do you do all that you do? So one of the things about being a leader, if you like, and the place I occupy is looking very busy. But the way to do that is, to me, is to delegate and to empower people to make their own decisions. So in Tree of Life, I just to say, people who don't know, I just had a health scare. I was out of action for 3.5, 4 months. So I'm only just back. And you know what? I wasn't missed. I mean, I was missed. Of course I was. People missed me. But actually, the Tree of Life genome engine and all the people picked up the pieces I dropped very suddenly and have delivered. And to me, I'm so proud of that. For them, yes, but I can be slightly smug myself, because I think that means that we have been able to do what we wanted, which is empower people to do the right thing. So how do you do all the stuff that you do? The answer is delegate. The other stuff that people ask me is, how do I know all this stuff? Because I know a vast amount of really arcane information about organisms and genomes and things. And, I'm an avid reader. I'm a bit of a sponge. So the answer is I just read a lot and remember some of it. Yeah. So those are the two things I get asked most. One of them I have an answer to, which is delegate and empower. And the other one is just read more. Yeah.
Oh gosh, I love it. There's a saying that some people say in pop culture. The context usually changes slightly, but the phrase is something to the effect of, my ancestors walked so that I can run. And I actually prefer to say that my ancestors ran, so I better F and run too. Because I wanna keep up that tradition of that spirit of resiliency, and also trying to build a better world for the people that come after us. And I think that this is something that, as an Indigenous woman, I self-identify as a woman, is incredibly important because women in academia, it's still a struggle. I know recent statistics in certain biological sciences discipline state that the percentage of women graduating with PhDs in disciplines are now slightly outnumbering those of our male counterparts. But the reality is that we as women in the field are still largely earlier career compared to more established researchers. And that's incredibly important, really thinking about the power dynamics of the spaces in which we occupy, not only in science as a discipline, but just science as an academic pursuit. Like a lot of these institutions, we just need a lot of fundamental change, not only in terms of how we're thinking about scientific processes, but also who's doing it and for whom. And I think a lot of these in emerging fields of intersectionality, we have this emergence of data feminism and rethinking ethics and compassion about the data that we are collecting. But a lot of that also dovetails with Indigenous data stewardship, which, yes, is having its moment right now, because I can't tell you how many times we've been pulled into conversations related to Indigenous data sovereignty in the past couple of years. But for us, having the community right to exercise decision-making authorities about our data is something that is embedded throughout all of our processes and traditions and worldviews. So to see that actually have increased emergence in the space of science is, I think, would be incredibly great. Because I kind of see this this shift in the fields, and I'd like to see that continue, but also at the same time, I recognize that the struggle is just continually ongoing, and the struggle reveals itself in new venues. And so I'm all for building the foundation for the future generations so that hopefully they feel empowered to make choices that they think will benefit them and also benefit all of our communities and societies.
Thank you both. I mean, that I'm really resonating with what you're both describing of like resiliency and the foundations that we've built or that have, are built for us and that we are privileged to sort of be able to journey on. Mark, I know for everyone here, I'm so glad you're doing well and that you're able to join us today. Honestly, you have been such a supporter of our work. With justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion from the beginning. And so I thank you for that. Crystal, obviously you have been too. But I'm so glad you're here. You're sharing now about your personal resiliency here. And Crystal, you're, sharing about my ancestors ran. So I better effing run too. I connect with that so much as well. And so in thinking about this idea of resiliency and building a better world, I want to shift us towards thinking about justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And just so as a group, we're on the same page, one definition that we use a lot for justice is this idea of seeking fairness in an unfair world and the many ways that that might look like. And so I'm wondering what you each think about, what do you wish that people were thinking differently when it came to thinking about this idea of justice and then equity, diversity, and inclusion as ways to make this world, this particular world that we're calling biodiversity genomics, fairer to all the people participating and benefiting from this science?
Are we going order again, Crystal?
I'll go whatever way you want.
We're at a
You go
table.
first this time,
That's
Crystal.
what's happening.
Okay.
Break the mold, Crystal. You go first.
All right. Awesome. Thank you. So I love that this emergent set of data governance principles have emerged, FAIR, findability, accessibility, interoperability, replicability. And I'm like, oh, that's a cute little co-optation of a word there to mean what I feel like it is something different. Because when I first read the word, the fair governance principles, it kept using the words equity and inclusion and like access and for communities. But when I was really reading out the critical eye, I'm like, who's writing this? Who's written this? And who are they actually talking about is going to benefit from these principles? Oh, it's scientists who wrote the rules of engagement for themselves. Oh, how quaint. Talking about scientists' access to data. I'm like, well, if we think outside of our bubble, of our research bubble, and we think about where does data usually get generated from, which is usually external to the scientific community, especially in biodiversity, heavily drawing upon these discovered or yet not yet discovered genomes from, it's usually from indigenous lands and from culturally stewarded species, and like the entire history of the entire history of collections and biology is like rooted in this, you know, one way movement of data and knowledges from disenfranchised, disempowered peoples into academic institutions. So when I think about the work there, I don't think about in the context of this small little dominion compared to like the rest of the global society in which we should be thinking about. I'm thinking more about, okay, if we're going to make science truly equitable and hopefully more ethical for all, then we also need to be decentering a singular lens of whose ethics and whose definition of equity we're utilizing. And this is where I love then the incorporation and inclusion of other viewpoints, but not like other as in that quotation, because there's also danger in the otherization of like academic approaches, but just realizing that there is a value in incorporating and understanding other systems of knowledge and knowledge generation that we could include. And if I'll just leave it there. That's a good soapbox moment to end on.
It's good. I'd not thought about fair in that way before. To me, fair is to do with the reproducibility of science as a whole. I mean, and science as a Western construct we can discuss. I mean, that is a thing, but there's a bit there about fair as a response to it's called the crisis of repeatability or reproducibility in science. But yeah, it's definitely a particular set of ethics. And for me, on the Jedi part, one of the things that's been really important for me and hopefully for my team and people here at Tree of Life is realizing that the problem isn't out there and isn't out there for someone else to solve. And I think for me that's been an important guiding principle, that we have to act in our own domain in whatever ways we can to not only act in a just, equitable, etc. way, but also to try and ensure that the people and organizations we act with are also behaving in the same way, and to call out when it doesn't happen. So I think that's not always easy. I sit in an incredibly rich institute in an incredibly rich, and I mean money rich, country. So, you know, it is inherently unfair, but hopefully we can spend more and more of our money and more of our thinking time making sure that it becomes more fair.
I'm so
Yeah.
glad that you were the one to raise the importance of highlighting where injustices lie within our domains, because I feel like science tries to purport that it is objective, and it's not, right? The systems by which design what research projects are worthy of funding at different scales, and even like who is credentialed enough to practice science, there are some power dynamics that are in place. And I feel like that we could have a better platform for pursuing science and more ethically and equitably minded approaches if people just acknowledge that positionality and framing are so important for acknowledging our biases and the, our power parities in the spaces that we occupy. And I feel like it would have been a lot easier for just my entry into science if we just had more people that were more senior than me that acknowledged that yes, power parity was a thing, and instead kept shifting toward this meritocracy that in actuality doesn't exist in this idealized way that we say it does. And I'm just like calling on this as like a general point of reflection for everyone in the field that we all have some sort of privilege and power, and I would love for us to just like be self-reflective or even just acknowledge that that is a component of how we interact with each other. And I'm that's something I'm trying to teach to my trainees. I think, of course, they're a little bit more attuned to it because whatever this next generation of students are, I mean, they are engaging with a world that didn't exist when I was coming up, even though it was like maybe 5 to 10 years ago. But I do have a lot of like positive I'm regarding the next space of scientists and data leaders to really take forward these grounding conversations that we're having now.
Yeah, that was, oh, sorry, Mark, please go on.
No, I was going to respond to that a bit. So one of the things I'm by saying things about trying not to make the problem out there. One of the things you mentioned was the amount of time it's taking to change the makeup of the scientific community, because most of the senior people are like me, white and male. And if 50% of the grad students are now female, or more than 50%, then we can see a change coming. But can we wait for the 40, 50 years it takes for that wave to get to the top? And the answer is no. And I think we have to be absolutely clear that we have to encourage, support all the way. So here at Sanger, we have something called the Excellence Fellowship, which is for a postdoctoral fellowship, which is for individuals of Black British heritage. And the explicit drive for this was us realizing that there weren't candidates for the next step, because there weren't who were of Black British heritage, because they hadn't made it into the fellowship bubble. And they hadn't made it into the fellowship bubble because they hadn't made it into the other bubble because they were Black and British. And they hadn't made, and so we're trying to reach back as far as we can into the training system that exists inside science in the UK and possibly globally. I mean, we do have a bit of a global reach to support people of, well, the non-traditional STEM audience, if you like, to try and encourage that talent. And it is real talent. These are amazing people who are doing brilliant science, just inspiring individuals, actually. And so I'm just aware that, saying the problem is out there, I can't just blame the universities for not training the students, or I can't blame the PhD supervisors for not training the PhD students unless I do something to help that. So I think that for me is a personal commitment to try and making those changes.
So I think those are really amazing points. I can really appreciate what both of you said about the consideration of perspectives and the system of science that we operate in, and how we can affect it and change it. I think that's amazing. Both from the external looking in and thinking about like where we as scientists fit in this broader world that we're in, and also internally in that self-examination of how because we really do have so much control. We actually do have control over the system that we operate in if we choose to take it. And so I can really appreciate both of those. I guess one thing that we have about maybe 5 minutes left. So maybe just to give you a heads up before we sort of switch to some of the audience oriented questions. So maybe just a last question that you can answer maybe a little more briefly, but it's still an important question. We are here at the EBP, right? And so this is the EBP Biodiversity Genomics meeting. Like we've got all these Earth Biogenome Project people here, other people from affiliated projects all over the world. And one thing that we're really curious about, what you think about is, what are the biggest opportunities for us to, in the EBP and all these affiliated programs and projects and people within these projects, what are the biggest opportunities for us to create this more just system of science? What are the, even as thinking as little as either it could be big or it could be small, thinking about individuals and what can individuals do? Because we have people from all different kinds. We have senior people, we have junior people, we have trainees. Everybody has a role to play. But we could think about it from a big perspective or a little perspective, whichever one you like. But we just got a couple minutes, and I wonder if you could both maybe give us a short answer, what you think about that.
Short answer. I want to give a big shout out to the African Biogenome Project, who are organizing workshops across the continent for early career scientists to introduce them to genomics. They're running these workshops with thousands of people attending, thousands. And they're trying to run laboratory training courses, not for the thousands, unfortunately, they don't have that much space, but for hundreds of people. And they want Africa's biodiversity to be sequenced by Africans on African soil. And I think that is such a great vision. And that's what, the Sanger Institute where I work is about sequencing things. But we also should have a mission to make sure that things get sequenced elsewhere by the people who choose those genomes for sequencing and who live in the nations where those genomes are found. So big shout out to the Africa Biogenome Project for what they're doing.
Mark, I'm just going to jump in real quick before you, Crystal, answer. I think that's such a great example because thank God and the entire Africa Biogenome Project team has really committed, as you're saying, to doing things at a local, tangible level and really thinking about not just we want more African scientists doing this, but how do we do that and where are the specific bottlenecks within our specific structure and systems where we are living and working and finding solutions there. And it's been really incredible to see how they have scaled this up and have made it regional. So they don't just host it in one part. Africa is such a large continent, but they host it throughout the year in different places and are really addressing that need. It's been really beautiful to watch as one example of things that are happening. Crystal, give us your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. A genome is not just a genome. A data point is not just a data point. I think we have before us a unique opportunity to set the international stage for doing not just genome science, but science better than we have ever seen it done before. I really, in talking about directly to Indigenous community members, or even scientific communities that tend to go kind of are less visible than other scientific communities. I think there's a great opportunity here to think about embedded LC, thinking about being more inclusive of ethical principles that are not just from a historic science perspective, thinking about building policy, thinking about building technology infrastructures, really thinking about uplifting everyone so that everyone has a part to play in the space of biodiversity genomics, but then also the related impacts of climate, understanding the changes to the climate, sustainability, conservation. It all ultimately impacts us. And so we need to be more inclusive of widening the actors who are engaged in the project, all of our related projects. So I love seeing those conversations take forward because it feels like it's a part of something historic. Even if it's small, there's something about it that just feels fundamentally different than how I've seen it done even just 10 years ago.
Beautiful, Krista. I love you know, what you're speaking to, it brings to mind this idea of making the invisible visible and bringing things forward. And sometimes it's invisible to us, right? This idea that we all have scaffolds of some sort, and can we broaden to see other ways of being? And you both, you know, again, have been really, by being vulnerable with us and sharing. I mean, I know both of you in different capacities and have already learned so much. And, you know, in the time we've been having this conversation, we do want to involve our audience members. And I know some questions have been sent to Nicolette, who's been monitoring the chat for us privately and ahead of time. And so Nicolette is going to share her screen with us for the polling platform. There's directions in the chat. If you missed them initially, you can very quickly join. You're going to press skip for now at the registration part, and it's going to launch you into Sadye Páez's waiting room, and we're going to have we're going to be able to vote.
Sadye,
Yes.
I just need 1 minute. I refreshed and it deleted 2 of my questions. So give me
Got it.
60
Okay.
seconds, talk about something, and then I'll get it back going.
Not a problem. I actually have a question that came up from earlier. Mark, you were talking about being an avid reader. And so a pop question of like, what are each of you reading non-science these days? What is something that you're just into?
The book I'm in the middle of at the moment is Louise Erdrich's latest novel.
Okay.
She's a Native American author. She runs a bookshop, which to me, I think she has the ideal life. She runs a bookshop and she writes books. She wrote a beautiful book called oh gosh, it was Lakes and Books of Ojibwe Country. I can't remember. A little memoir about taking her daughter north to meet her daughter's biological father, and also to meet the ancestral lands and to see some of the petroglyphs from the ancestors. And that little book is just such a lovely meditation on time and space and being human and being connected to the past. Anyway, but she also writes these lovely multi-generational novels about Minnesota mostly, which is what I'm in the middle of at the moment. It's just I've got about 40 pages to go, and it's all the strands of the story are coming together. So that's what I'm reading at the moment.
I love that part of a book when everything is like about to come together at the end. Oh, thank
It's
you,
like
Mark.
the best scientific papers. It's best scientific papers, you know.
It all
just
comes
go
together at
through
the end.
It all comes together.
Crystal, what are you reading these days?
Okay. My what I'm reading is interesting because I'm reading a lot of nonfiction. So that's because I'm writing a book proposal right now. I think the more salient question is, what trashy thing am I watching on Netflix or Hulu on all of these upcoming plane rides? And so the answer to the what am I reading right now, sorting things out, classification of consequences inside technology, by Jeffrey Bowker and Susan Lee Starr. It's just like talking about variety of classification systems and also even race classification of apartheid in South Africa, especially and also what's a virus, what's a bacterium in the space of emerging pathogens. And then of course, what trashy thing am I watching? It's Bridgerton. It's going to be Bridgerton for a while.
Oh, Bridgerton's great. I'll admit it out loud. I seen Marcella smiling, so I'm assuming that she's watching it too. I think that maybe there's some fellows here who are also secretly Bridgerton fans. Nicolette is letting me know that our platform is frozen, so we're gonna adapt on the fly. So I'm going to, if you want to vote, I'm gonna ask you to come off camera.
Sadye, I just got it.
You just got it. Okay, amazing, amazing. So Nicolette's gonna share her screen, and we're gonna have you vote on one more question. And Andreas, I see your question. We'll punt that over to Crystal to follow up maybe at a later time. So 3 questions. Let's have you go ahead and pick the top one that you want Mark and Crystal to answer for you. So the first one is, how has your feminist past influenced your current work in terms of recognizing the challenges of women scientists? The second question is, how would you like the biodiversity genomics community to incorporate other systems of knowledge and knowledge generation in their daily work? And the very last question is, how would you like leaders to engage in discussions around justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion? So we'll give you 30 more seconds to vote. The top question will be the one that Crystal and Mark will answer. I'm going to give them each 2 minutes or less to answer this and to wrap up in their answer, kind of their last parting words to us in this conversation. And as you're finishing voting, I don't know about you, Nate, but I feel like I needed way more time with each of our speakers. I think just
Without
to
a
get
doubt.
in.
I still
And
want to know what books Crystal's parents have on their shelves. That's what I
yeah, yeah.
want.
Oh gosh. Okay, so it looks like our winner is going to be the second question. So how would you like the biodiversity genomics community to incorporate other systems of knowledge and knowledge generation in their daily work?
I'll go really quickly, but I have to hop off because I have a medical appointment right now building behind me.
You can read.
So indigenous peoples have had a lot of fascinating uses for some of the plants that surround us. A short example, jojoba, which many people don't know or may know, is like a common ingredient in shampoo. It also, because it acts as a detergent, makes it difficult for isolating phases if you are, generating DNA or trying to pull out DNA from a specimen. So I think like all of these like integrated ways of traditional uses and also the role in the ecological spheres around it, but then also being respectful and not trying to commercialize or co-opt those things or is something that I would like to see a little bit more in the EBP.
Will I go next?
Yeah, please.
Thank you, Crystal. So I'm very aware that the nation state in which most of the work that we at Tree of Life do are Britain and Ireland, and then the Northern European states. And so many of most of the species we sequence don't come with the same recognition of ancestral stewardship. Although across all the nation states of the world, people do value the wildlife they share the planet with really hugely. I'm really amazed by in the UK, we're generally a treeless country. I mean, we've got quite a few trees, but not as many as we should. And many people pay organizations in order to be able to go and stand on a hillside in the pouring rain, in the cold, in the middle of the winter and plant trees. So people will pay to engage themselves with restoration biodiversity. So I think for me, the other ways of knowledge or understanding I'd like to bring into the work that we do, especially in Darwin Tree of Life, is getting those local stories about what it is that people own or feel ownership of or feel stewardship of in the local wildlife. I always remember collecting leaves from some ancient oak trees, and people coming past and asking, what are you doing to, they didn't say it, but what are you doing to my oak tree? And the oak tree was 600 years old. It was in a private piece of land. It wasn't their oak tree. They just walked their dog past it every day. And then telling me stories that they had acorns from that tree planted on their husband's grave, or they'd handed out acorns from that tree to all their children. So their children all had baby oak trees from the same tree. So I do get the feeling that we could gather many more stories of people's feeling of connection with the wildlife we sequence, and therefore build a better understanding of what the genomic data can do in terms of preservation, rewilding, etc. So that for me is kind of something I'd say that we could do for the Darwin Tree of Life project, is collect those stories.
That's great. I love both those answers, and thanks so much for them. And I think we're at the point where we need to start closing out things. I just want to say thanks so much to Mark and Crystal for sharing your amazing stories and time with us. I wonder if it's possible, if anybody, we'd love to get a picture of people who are attending, if you don't mind. So if anybody wants to show their camera, open up their camera, and we're gonna see a quick snapshot, screenshot that we can remember this moment with. We'd love to have you all join us for that. If not, no big deal. It's totally fine. So we'll give you guys to I don't know, the count of 10.
Nicolette, you're ready to take the photo?
Yeah, I'll be responsible for the photo. So here we go, like 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, I got it. All right.
Amazing. Nate, take us to the closing.
Yeah, so I just want to say, today was an amazing discussion, and it was not about yes or no, right or wrong, good or bad, nor was it about finding perfect answers to all of our questions. Crystal and Mark shared parts of their stories, and we hope that it helped translate the broader concepts of justice or the pursuit of fairness in an unfair world with tangible examples of decision making, of experiences, and leadership in biodiversity genomics. The problems we face towards sequencing all life on Earth are pretty huge, and they are complex. And there's not one path in how we accomplish this lofty goal. There are many potential ways forward, lots of different things we could do. And through the stories shared by Mark and Crystal, we hope that you have gained a new way of seeing some of the richness of diversity and perspectives of people and of the people who are in biodiversity genomics.
Yeah, beautifully said, Nate. And like we shared earlier, we hope to share many more of the stories within our community with each other. We really do believe that regardless of age, your perspective, your culture, all the different facets of who we are as people, we have so much to learn from each other. And so we would really love your feedback. And we're asking if you have about five-ish, 6 minutes, if you can complete our anonymous survey. You can grab it off that QR code, or you can put in the website there. It's also in the chat. Give us feedback on what you thought of Evolve, Emerge, Embolden. If you have any feedback that you want to just share with our speakers, something that just really resonated with you, we will collect that and share that with them to encourage them. Again, they agreed to pioneer this with us. They had no idea what was, really coming. And I think it's so beautiful when people share who they are with you. It's such a gift to be able to be in spaces like that with each other. And so I'm very grateful. I hope that you feel that way too. And to close us out, Nate, tell us what you think.
I just want to say thanks again, and please join me in thanking our speakers, Crystal and Mark. Give them a round of applause, whatever you want to do, emojis, reactions, whatever it is. And as well, thanks to Nicolette and Mark, our production team. And lastly, we want to thank you, our audience, for joining us here at Emerge, Evolve, Embolden. And we greatly appreciate all of your time and attention.
Yeah, and I want to also thank Maja. She's been working behind the scenes. We have a logo coming up for this series. Like I said, we hope to be ongoing. It's still in production, but she's also been a part of our team here. I'm Sadie, one of your hosts. Nate has been an amazing co-host to debut this with me. Nicolette and Mark, also thank you for your help. Mark and Crystal, thank you for being on board with us for this. And we really hope that as they share their truths into existence with you, our community, that new perspectives have emerged for you today, that you gave yourself grace today, and you'll continue to give yourself grace as you continue on the journey of learning, as you continue to evolve, and that you will feel more emboldened as you keep going forward to create the world we desire, living in harmony with nature and with each other. So thank you again to all of you. So grateful. Have a beautiful rest of the meeting, and we'll hopefully see you at the next one. Bye, everybody.